What if I told you that presidential candidates are sold just like any other product, say a car or a can of soda? It sounds a little wild, right? But that's exactly what we're diving into today. The long and pretty fascinating history of campaign branding, going all the way back to the 1800s and right up to today. So let's kick things off with this pretty provocative idea from the University of Virginia's Darton School. From a marketing perspective, presidential candidates are not so different from consumer products. Now that's the core concept that really drives almost all of modern politics, so let's see what that actually looks like in action. So how exactly does a campaign sell a candidate? Well, let's open up the modern playbook and look at one of the clearest and you could argue most successful examples in recent memory. Okay, let's break this down just like a product launch. For Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, the tagline was incredibly simple: "Make America Great Again." It tapped directly into this belief that the country was in decline. The benefit for the voter was crystal clear. He would be the one to reverse that decline. And his proof? Well, it was his whole persona as a successful businessman. Honestly, this is classic brand positioning straight out of a Marketing 101 textbook. So how well did that message actually stick? Get this. A staggering 73% of people knew his campaign slogan without any prompting. In the marketing world, that's what's called unaided awareness. And let me tell you, hitting a number that high is unbelievably rare. It's powerful stuff. And here's where you can really see the difference between good and truly great branding. While a massive 73% knew Trump's slogan, only 16% knew his primary rival, Ted Cruz's. I mean, that gap is just huge. And it's because Trump's message had this broad emotional appeal. Courageous conservative, on the other hand, was aimed at a much, much narrower slice of his own party. In the political marketplace, the simpler, bigger message just completely dominated. And here's the kicker. It wasn't just about spending the most money. It was about getting the best return on investment, or ROI. Trump's campaign was an absolute masterclass in this. By plastering that slogan everywhere, on hats, signs, you name it, and just leveraging a constant stream of free media coverage, he generated enormous awareness without the giant ad budgets of his rivals. So that's the modern playbook. But you might be surprised to hear that this whole idea of selling a president isn't new at all. In fact, its roots go back way, way further than you'd probably think. Which really begs the question, right? Has it always been like this? Where did this whole concept of a presidential brand even begin? Well, for that, we have to jump in our time machine and go way back. All right, meet William Henry Harrison. This is a piece of campaign art from his run in 1840. And yeah, if it looks like an ad, that's because it pretty much was. The campaign used images of a log cabin and hard cider to brand him. And here's the thing, Harrison was actually from a super wealthy, prominent Virginia family, as a rugged common man. Sound a little familiar? Historians literally call this the first modern campaign, and the playbook they used is just stunningly familiar. Step 1, find a war hero. The Whigs chose Harrison to go up against the popular Andrew Jackson. Step 2, craft a simple, powerful image. They sold this wealthy guy as a salt-of-the-earth frontiersman. Step 3, create a super catchy slogan. Tippecanoe and Tyler, too, became iconic. And finally, step 4, go straight to the masses with massive rallies, parades, and even branded merchandise. And this was all happening in 1840. Incredible. Okay, so Harrison's marketing campaign was a huge, huge success. He won the election. But in business, right, a great launch is meaningless if the product itself fails. So how do we measure a president's long-term performance? Well, this brings us to the ultimate performance review. And it turns out, historians have a system for judging a president's legacy. And it's a fascinating look at how they all stack up against each other. Every so often, historians rank the presidents based on their performance while in office. They use these categories that range from great, like Abraham Lincoln, all the way down to failure, like James Buchanan. It basically gives us a historical scorecard on who really succeeded and who didn't. So where does our marketing pioneer, William Henry Harrison, end up on this list? Well, in a really ironic twist, historians consistently rank him as a failure. His brand was revolutionary, sure, but he served the shortest term in U.S. history, just 31 days. It was the ultimate example of a spectacular launch for a product that barely even made it off the shelves. Now, if you look at these rankings since World War II, a pretty curious trend emerges. According to multiple surveys of historians, Democratic presidents in this period have, on average, been ranked higher than their Republican counterparts. Remember, a lower number means a better rank. Now, there are a ton of complex reasons for this, but it definitely raises an interesting question about whether certain presidential brands just end up having more staying power with historians. So we've seen how presidents are branded and how they're ranked by history, but what happens when a president's brand loses and then tries to make a comeback? Okay, let's talk about the presidential do-over. Believe it or not, this has only happened once in American history. Back in the Gilded Age, you had Grover Cleveland, who served his first term. Then he lost his re-election to Benjamin Harrison. But then, and this is the wild part, 4 years later, Cleveland ran again against that same guy Harrison, and he won, returning to the White House. What makes this so important is that Grover Cleveland is the only president to ever lose a re-election campaign and then come all the way back to win again 4 years later. It was the first and so far the only successful relaunch of a presidential brand. And this unique bit of history is exactly why his name always pops up whenever a former president starts thinking about another run. Which brings our whole explainer full circle from the 1840s all the way to today. We've seen how presidents get marketed like products, how they're ultimately judged by history, and how they can even sometimes get a second chance. And it all leaves us with one final question to chew on. If history is any guide, what presidential do-overs might we see next?